Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining TechWhirl's Fast Five discussions. My name's Al Martine and I'll be your moderator today. We got a neat topic and a very topical one, which we're talking about professional writing careers and finding the right role. And we could probably preface this, and we certainly didn't in the invites and the promotions, but the I need a job or the job I have I really dislike and I need a new job. And that's what we're going to attempt to at least take a pass at in the next hour. I will say, and it should be obvious, but you want to always kind of ground ourselves in what the folks you're seeing here and ourselves. This is the conversation we're having is going to be a roundtable discussion. And while we have some folks with a considerable amount of experience and we have some ideas that we've researched and what we think are some valuable tips, we by no means have the market cornered. And we just want to say that only because your results may vary and some ideas and things that we were even talking about this in our pre-meeting saying, one strategy may work for a particular career and industry, a different strategy may have to be utilized for a different one. And even if you are still being paid to be a communicator. So let's introduce everybody. We have a few folks on our panel. Dr. Erica Conrad, she broke into the writing world working in public broadcasting, which is pretty cool. 20 years with Northern Arizona University. She's the area coordinator and of the professional writing program with NAU. So we have Melissa Wyatt. Melissa works for the University of Arizona's Cooperative Extension as a family, consumer, and health sciences agent. Her work focuses on two areas, food, nutrition, and health programs, and family child development. And let's see, Caroline Wren, she is relatively new NAU master's student, and her aim is as she finishes up that program, and even to this point, if you're needing someone to work in fiction publishing, ideally as an editor, she's your main person. And then finally, our executive editor and the co-owner of TechWhirl, Connie Giordano. So thank you all for joining. And Dr. Conrad, welcome. It has been a year. We have our conversation. We have for years now. I had it in October, and we really appreciate you joining and inviting Melissa and Caroline to join us. But before we get into it, we hear you enjoy watching other people bake. I worked on that. I shopped that a little to figure it out. So any shows stand out to you from that perspective?
Yeah, Al, I love the Great British Baking Show. And I figured out that what I really like are the baby ducks and the lambs and sheep and the British accents. I love dialects. I'm an applied linguist by training, so I really love dialects. And of course, I love to watch other people baking things that turn out right.
I haven't seen many recipes with baby ducks. Specific. Where you put the comma. Fantastic. Cool. Yeah. Well, good. And we'll have to maybe next time. Maybe we'll figure out a way to incorporate directions, right, and being able to give instructions into the process. And we already have our 2021 webinar. We might have just figured it out.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, Melissa, thank you again. Thank you for joining us. And you enjoying riding horses, gardening, cooking, and hiking. Any specific type of cooking as your favorite? Maybe I can have a run here on topics. But and then, are you also a fan of the Great British Baking Show too?
It's interesting. I don't really watch too much on the cooking show side of things. I watch once in a while, and I have to say my favorite is Alton Brown. I like the science of food and cooking, which is why my background's in nutritional sciences, but I just like when we can mesh those two worlds together. In terms of what I usually cook, I'm I consider what I call myself a kind of a home cook, back to basics, just this, those home recipes that you may think of when you think of cooking at home. Most of the time what I try to do with that is maybe take those basics and take them maybe in a slightly different direction that people weren't necessarily thinking about, like adding different kinds of vegetables to a dish or things of that nature. That's primarily what I do. It's like lasagna, most people put spinach, I put Swiss chard kind of thing. So something a little bit different, but it's still that same familiar lasagna that grandma would make kind of thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
No baby ducks in that. Sorry.
No baby ducks in the lasagna.
No, sorry. I'm probably
no lamb either. My husband's vegetarian, so I gotta keep with the vegetables. So
no baby ducks were hard.
No baby ducks. No.
All right, Caroline. For you, a couple questions here. Said you're originally goal in fiction publishing. Do you have an ideal company? If you had that extra 5 seconds here to make your pitch, do you have a company you'd really like to work for in publishing?
Oh, sorry. I would say Harlequin or Penguin Books Publishing. I've just grown up reading their books, and there's just such a wide variety. And that's really what I'm looking for, is to kind of, I'm so early in my career, discovering, okay, what's my exact niche? Ideally, it'd be in romance novels, romance fiction, but I'm open to anything. They're my favorite, and we all have our guilty pleasures.
If you can get a role where you can publish books about romantic books about baby ducks, you're all set.
That's true.
There you go.
The making of an egg. Wow. Waddled with a look in his eye. All right. All right. Second question is, so you're originally from Alaska and you're now in Flagstaff, and recently I hear first time seeing a deer.
Yes, my neighborhood has this family of deer, and so there's the dad and the 2 babies. Don't know where the mom is. Romance to look into, I guess. But
hey, now I like this. We got our themes coming.
Exactly. But they're so fun. I love them. So much nicer than moose.
Like a smaller, friendlier moose. Okay, exactly. Cool. All right, Connie. And I know for a fact you recently celebrated a birthday.
And milestone birthday, yes.
And went out to Asheville, North Carolina. How was it? What was it everything you expected and more?
My sisters and I went out to tour the Biltmore Estate, which is amazing.
Beautiful.
It's billed as the largest private home in the United States. To give you an idea, they have 43 bathrooms, so it probably is. I would not want to be doing housekeeping there, but it was astonishing. My favorite part of the house itself was the 10,000 books. So I'm close, but I'm not there. I have about 1,800 books in my house. So anyway, that was really cool. And the gardens, there's 6 or 7 gardens around there. The property is 40,000 acres. And there's a winery. So of course we did a wine tasting and whatnot. And speaking of baking, I like to watch my younger sister bake because she is so amazing at it. So I didn't get to see it being baked, but she did make me a cake and brought it to Asheville. So I did get to enjoy somebody else's baking efforts.
And as a reminder, what really goes with a good red wine. What goes with a really good red wine? Here, again, I'm moving.
Lots of goats. One of the things, they have, instead of, I would hate to be responsible for mowing 40,000 acres every week, but they brought on apparently several goat herds in different places where they keep the grass to a minimum. So, good for them. Home of the beginning of the conservation movement and forest management movement in the U.S., which I did not Apparently, I think it was Henry Vanderbilt, the guy who built the place, was very big into conservation and forest management and architecture, and could read 10 languages and never went to college and all kinds of interesting things like that. But it was and it's just a beautiful area of North Carolina in the mountains, and it's wonderful. So definitely a worthwhile visit if you're ever in the state.
Good deal. All right, let's before we get into our discussion on finding that perfect role, I want to talk a little bit about Northern Arizona University's professional writing graduate program, their master's program, as well as their certificate. The professional writing programs there are designed to provide graduate level education and communication skills that are daily in demand among engineers, scientists, finance experts, and other professionals in the business, industry, and government. And all the hours taken to obtain the certificate can also be used to fulfill the requirements of the MA in English at NAU, as well as the professional writing emphasis in the Master's of Administration degree offered by NAU Graduate College. So anyway, this is our shameless finance part of the promotions here. If they are our sponsor, we longtime partner of ours. And if you are really interested, we're going to be talking about how education can play into finding that role as we go through this today. Check them out. It's an NAU. You can Google it or just come to TechWhirl. There's a good chance if you're watching this, this time you're on our site. There's an ad, 2 or 3 ads floating around on the site. Click on it, reach out to them. And so, yeah, absolutely. They're a great partner of ours, good opportunity to build some skills as you're trying to figure out what that perfect role is. So, yep, I highly recommend it. So let's dive into this and talk a little bit about what are Fast 5 discussions. Hey, there's almost always more than 5 questions. It just has a really nice sound. And frankly, we created about 8 years ago. And what we have are some big questions we want to ask, and it's a panel discussion. And we don't take ourselves overly serious here, and we're just going to answer until we burn out the clock. And then, unfortunately, we're probably still going to have a bunch of stuff that we would love to talk about. So without further ado, Connie, do you want to lead off here and ask that first question?
Sure. And this is really one that anybody on the panel can answer, because I think there may be some variations on a theme here. So what would you all consider to be the roles that you would include in a professional writer description?
I can start that one out, Connie. I did a little bit of Googling to see roles defined, and it's interesting that there are websites like CareerNet and what was the one that I found? Mighty Recruiter. I had never heard of that one. That have templates for people who are writing job descriptions. If you're hiring, you can find templates for job descriptions. And the job description for professional writer included things like interviewing subject matter experts and writing instructional manuals, things like creating articles for media, creating articles for blogs, script writing for TV and podcasts, collaborating with non-writers, so collaborating with content matter experts, collaborating with management. So a lot of working with other people, engineers, public relations, marketing folks, creating marketing materials, creating, like I said, user instructions, but also other kinds of training materials, creating presentations for business to business communication or marketing. What else? Also writing proposals, either grant proposals or other types of proposals, work proposals, writing reports, writing press releases. And that's what I found for professional writer. I'm sure you all can think of other things that professional writers do, like write romance novels, writing recipes. Yeah. Any of you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think and some of the roles that I've done within the University of Arizona, within cooperative extension, outside of cooperative extension, there hasn't always been some of those specifically defined roles that you mentioned, Erica, but definitely there's things that you do once you're in the role that do fit with those descriptions, whether you're creating marketing materials, in the case for cooperative extension, to get people to join your program or participate in a workshop or some other live event like a food demonstration or something of that nature. So there's definitely things that fall into even other positions that you may not necessarily think are writing intensive or writing heavy or are advertised as a writing, position, but they're embedded into other positions. So even if it's not an outright content strategist or something like that, you can still find that writing is heavily involved in a lot of different positions and jobs and roles out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I left out social media. So writing tweets.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. Communication, right? Ability to collect and analyze and then elaborate somewhere, whether it be Twitter and marketing materials or documentation.
Yeah.
And you got to get paid for it, right? That's the beautiful part about being a professional.
Yeah.
That's always the case, but it certainly feels that way. So here's the question I have: is that for all the roles we've mentioned, and then we mentioned a broad range of them, are there some better than others these days? And I'm not sure. We write these questions and then asking them, when we say better, I guess we would say maybe from the perspective of enjoyment. How to frame that answer, right? Enjoyment, money, and job security maybe be a great way to frame that rating system. But which roles from you all's experience or from what we're seeing are better these days if you were just getting out into the market or wanting to do a job change?
Yeah. Al, I think that I want to start out with what I found when I looked on Indeed.com. I'm just looking at numbers of positions. And for professional writer, for those keywords, there were, I'm going to back up. For technical writer, there were 2,517 jobs yesterday. For proposal writer, there were 1,955 jobs out there on Indeed. And for grant writer, there were 865. Now, when I looked at professional writer, there were 7,269 positions.
Wow.
But professional writer included things like content writers, and some of those were contract work, as Connie knows all about. Some of them could have been content mills. I want to warn people about writing for content mills. It can be a good way to get experience, but not a great way to make a living unless you're really, really savvy. So I want to put out that warning. So for what it's worth. Makes
sense. Any chance any chance you looked at business analyst?
No, I did not.
Okay, maybe while you all are chatting, somebody else want to elaborate or refute? Big debate here.
I'll toss in too. This is a little bit more niche. Like as I previously mentioned, I'm just kind of starting this journey. One thing I will say that I discovered with this current pandemic is that even though there's some freedom in freelancing, I found that I was one of the first to go. And so that's kind of affected my own feelings of security and feeling like, I am an important member of whatever is going on. And it's not the fault of the business whatsoever. But my recommendation would be to people who are looking for initial jobs, looking for a way to truly make a living. I would search, rather than just freelancing, search for something that can be consistent and dependable, because you never know what's going to happen. And so when these things do happen, it's nice to have a steady job where you aren't the first to go. So that would be one of my suggestions.
And just to kind of add to that is also kind of research the company. So we research our positions sometimes, but you also need to research the company and what kind of environment they have there. Because, the saying goes that people don't leave a company, they leave a bad boss. So in thinking of that, you have to kind of go in and say, okay, are the people that are there, highly respected, etc., and those kinds of things? Because if turnover is really high, then that means there's something there that might not keep you there for a while. But you just kind of have to ask those kinds of questions when you're in the interview, when they come up with that famous phrase, do you have any questions for us? Right? Yeah, that's like in every interview, right? So
no, and don't be afraid to ask them, because
Yes.
you do score points when you actually ask questions rather than saying, no, I think I have everything I need, and trying to move on from there. But really good points, Melissa. There's also a couple of tools that you can use to assist with that. One is that if you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn, because everybody is there. You can make all sorts of connections there. And that will help you if there is a particular company you're interested in. You may be able to find people that will give you a little bit of insight into how the organizational culture works and that sort of thing. The other thing would be a tool like is it Glassdoor? Yeah, Glassdoor.
Yep.
That employees anonymously can rate the company on things like how good the CEO is, what's the culture like, what's the work environment like, how's the salary and the benefits and those sorts of things. And while you have to take a lot of that with a grain of salt, you also need to be able to sort of spot some trends if there might be some trouble in the future. And if you like, I use the LinkedIn feature for job searches. And when I see a lot of positions opening up in a given company, I have to wonder if there is a restructure that has just gone on or is underway. So there are things like that over time you can start gleaning a little bit more than you might just from looking at the initial job description. But definitely keep your options open between both freelance and full-time roles, and look beyond things that say writer in the job title, because you may find some stuff that'll fit you better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, Connie, you want to go ahead and hit the next question here?
And it sort of kind of leads a little bit into it, because when you're thinking about a professional writer role, what does that right role mean for your career? Looking at a career progression, what's a good initial role? What's a good medium experience role, and that sort of thing that can help you play to your strengths and keep moving in a forward progression on your career?
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry, Eric. You
Okay. Yeah, I've been thinking about this, Connie. I think it's a really good question. And I don't know if the right role, is it the right role? Is it the right organizational culture? Is it the right fit for my personality? Sometimes I think that's most important. So does the role fit my personality? So for example, I used to work in a laboratory. It was a nutrition lab, Melissa. And
there you go.
We did a lot of experiments, and it was not the right role for me, not because the work was bad or I wasn't able to do the work, but it didn't fit my personality. I really needed to be working with people instead of with rats. So, and instead of with numbers. So yeah, I like to think about this in terms of your strengths, your personality, what makes you tick, what makes you happy. Do you like interacting with people or rats?
And hopefully they're not the same.
And running stats all day. I mean, I've been on that side of it myself when, as a grad student, we had to do lab rotations and those kinds of research laboratories where you're using animal modeling and cell culture models and such. But yeah, you do have to think about that. What do you really enjoy? And I found myself, I could do the work. It wasn't, always great to be up at 4 a.m. to go do whatever you had to do at 5 a.m. at the lab. Those kinds of things were hard, but it's definitely doable. But you do have to think about what is it that you enjoy doing, and how can you kind of keep that being part of a role that you're going to be in or taking on. For me, I enjoy the teaching aspect of it. Yes, I do the writing, and I don't mind the writing, but I do love the teaching aspect of what I do, and I think it's a better opportunity for folks than feeling like you have to go to college. I know that's kind of one of the things that we're talking about is NAU's program, but in the work I do, it's all community based. So maybe if there's like a intimidation factor with signing up and how to navigate the university, we can kind of be that first bite, if you will, to use a nutrition food analogy.
One additional point, and this was actually given to me not in the beginning of my career, but it was recommended that one fit as we were talking about, right? Is it a cultural fit? Is it a role, all animals know people, which you're a people person, right? And there are others, right? Your real scientists may prefer the latter. And so, but the other one was that if you had two offers, go with the brand of the organization if you're in that position. And that a lot of times that you come out of undergraduate or graduate school and you are at that moment that school plus your resume. But then when you move to the first role, depending on where that company is, you then become that company, a little bit of your last education and your resume. So if you have, now it doesn't always happen for everyone, and it's certainly not a rule of thumb, but if you can go to have a brand that most folks have recognized versus even maybe a slightly less responsibility, because you then, as you go there, you then come out as that's a person, a Facebook person or a Google person or a Bank of America or Wells Fargo or any of the, whatever you were trying to, or any top brand, that doesn't hurt as long as the fit's right. So you can't just choose to go into a cutthroat, massive culture and then suddenly, because it has a nice brand, you're going to inevitably be miserable. But, that just bit of recommendation that I had received, it seemed sensible. And had I gotten it earlier in my career, I would have probably taken it.
Yeah, Al, I thought of another thing that I started to do just yesterday, thinking about Connie's question about the role. I started to do some long tail searches. Instead of just doing really short keywords like professional writer, I started typing in things like, what's a good job for someone who likes to encourage other people? And I found a bunch of sites that actually have articles that recommend different careers for people who like X or people who want to do Y. So I thought, wow, this is a new way of searching. So thinking about your role in that way, not necessarily a particular job title, because as Connie said, you might be doing a lot of writing, but your job title, like for me for years and years, was associate director. It wasn't writer, but mostly what I did was write reports, proposals, and tons of emails. So yeah, so I recommend trying this long tail search method, thinking about what is it that you like to do? What are your strengths? I typed in things like, I love to listen, and much more than I like to talk, and I like to encourage people. So I typed that in. What are some good jobs for people who like to encourage others? So that was a revelation.
That's really interesting. That's neat. I like that. That is new, and to me, and that's cool. So let's start talking about. We're in the middle right now. We're about 30 minutes to go here. So let's start talking about some of the things we can do to sharpen the saw and start getting to that perfect role. How does a program like NAU's help with finding that perfect professional writing role?
I'd love to chime in on this one.
Sure.
So in my undergraduate degree, I was actually pursuing something very different. I was pursuing teaching, which is a wonderful profession, but I felt like it wasn't quite fitting me. And I knew that I wanted to do something English related, but I had thought that I had very narrow paths. I had no idea that technical writing was even an option. And I was really fortunate enough to get Dr. Conrad for my junior year writing class. And suddenly it was like a whole new world of opportunities, and this feeling of like, I finally fit somewhere hit me, where I realized this is something I'm really good at. And most of it was technical writing documents. And I genuinely enjoyed creating them. So while, of course, I do want to be a romance editor, I also found that I love writing proposals. I love writing those professional documents, and I genuinely enjoy it. And I had no idea that that was an option. And so now in grad school, not only do I get to work with that same instructor, Dr. Conrad, I'm surrounded by peers who help me to better myself at those skills. Because even though I feel like I fit with it, I know I have so much to learn. And I feel like NAU has really helped me to cultivate that and grow as a writer and a reader and a creator. And I really appreciate that. And I feel like it's such a wonderful opportunity to kind of find where you belong and what will make you happy long-term in your career.
And just to quickly add to that, being in a career at this point for me, taking the time to do a certificate program at NAU has been amazingly helpful. And you get into the role that you're in, and you start to adopt some of the ways people have, guided you, because you have mentors in your role, or you have these go-to people that you ask questions like, well, how do I do this? Or is this a good way to do this, or whatever? And, but then we're starting to get into all of this, with COVID, we went all online, and that has not traditionally been what cooperative extension has done. I mean, we do online, we've been doing online, but it's not been heavily used. And it's been, I think, underutilized in at least some areas. And so learning about some of these things in the writing program has definitely allowed me to then lead my colleagues in shifting gears and how do we rethink what we do to fit an online audience. So it's been very helpful and wonderful that's been kind of the thing. And then once word gets around, at least where I'm at, it's a small world in our part of the organization. Everybody's like, oh, you've done this, so can you help guide us to do whatever? So you kind of become the guiding person and the leader in that aspect of things, which has been a good thing, because I'm still learning, and so I have to learn it and teach it at the same time, which always gives you a good crash course in how things work or don't work. So that's always a good thing to do. It's sometimes challenging to do it that way, but sometimes you get no other options. But it's been really good to participate in that.
Great.
Connie, you want to dive in, maybe a question on the skills?
When you're thinking about perhaps like applying for a specific job and whatnot, what kind of skills should you be thinking about that go beyond strictly, I know how to string together sentences and whatnot? And what are the skills that these tech writing courses can teach you that are most important when you're going after a particular role?
Yeah, I wonder, Melissa, you touched a little bit on things that you're learning now that you're actually teaching to other people. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you're learning about content strategy and the skills that you're picking up right now.
Sure. So content strategy is something I've been using since, I guess, a little bit before our classes started this fall, but trying to get everyone on the same page. We work on a what we consider county by county basis, and so we have people assigned to different counties, and oftentimes we're writing in kind of somewhat content silos. Yes, we may all be telling people to eat more fruits and vegetables or whatever, but the way we approach it may be a little bit different, especially moving into the online sphere. And so I'm working with a money management group that within the state for our organization, and we wanted to bring everybody together and kind of really have a more uniform messaging going out about finances and what we're teaching, and little nuggets of information that may entice people to want to come to our workshops and such. And so bringing everybody together and doing this, especially when we have folks that are really savvy on the Facebook, social media, that whole end of it, and then you have folks that aren't as savvy. They may be users, but they're not content generators for that particular platform. So bringing all of that together and saying, well, how do we make this work? We've been learning about content strategies, and I'm leading them as I'm learning through this process, and just reminding them that it is a process and it may be familiar. Sometimes it's helpful to describe it in different ways that they might be more familiar with. But really kind of getting them to see, the benefit of really bringing all of this together. It's just been a very interesting to do it. Because once again, you're kind of looked at as this expert, even though you're still learning.
Yeah. So Melissa, you're talking about soft skills.
Yes.
So not just writing skills
Right.
are important, but soft skills of how to manage a group of people around content. And then the hard skills of things like, how do you edit a document? What are some ways to approach an editing job? Mm-hmm. What are some ways to analyze your audience, figure out who it is you're writing for? Also, how do we make writing decisions at work? What are some resources that we can use? What kinds of decisions are different in the workplace than in academia? So, for example, some of the skills we teach, Connie, are unlearning academic skills and learning how to write for the workplace rather than for your English professor or your biology professor. What would a document look like at work? How do we approach it? What are some of the visual methodologies that we can use? So how do we design a document? How do we test it for usability? Those are all things that we focus on. I don't know, Carolyn, if you want to speak a little bit to some of your favorite things that you're learning skill-wise.
Yes. So, and this kind of connects back to that first question is, I think NAU really focuses on teaching you flexibility and adaptability. So rather than just having those concrete hard skills, it's also, okay, so how do I take these skills and translate them to different settings? So whether your audience is changing or your medium. And so I think that NAU prepares you to suit the needs of your employer, whether you're freelancing or if you have a consistent work environment. And so I think that there's this focus on how do we develop these very concrete skills, and how do we develop these interpersonal skills in order to ensure that we succeed in any area that may need those technical writing supports.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I follow up a little bit here? As long as I have my connection that is holding, is that I think one of the important things about that is having that adaptability also ultimately opens up new opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise even have considered. I got my degree in advertising, my undergraduate degree in advertising. So I started out as a copywriter. I have since owned my own businesses. I've been a business analyst. I've done a gabillion things. And somebody asked me one time, how do you apply for a technical writing job? And I said, well, stop looking for technical writing, because a lot of times they don't include it in the job description. Because I work for a financial services organization now. So I'm not a technical writer. I'm a communications manager and a knowledge manager. And so, being flexible about how you're going to approach something in the workplace is critical, because everybody's got different style and branding standards you have to pay attention to, as well as different tools that are going to be available to you, and different styles of team management, and it can vary tremendously inside the enterprise as well as between different companies. So I think that kind of flexibility and adaptability is crucial. And I'm really glad to hear that that's been a big part of what your experience has been.
All right. So let's slide over and start talking about our title here is Finding the Right Role. And we've been talking a lot about the core piece, but the final parts of this question is going to be talking about the search and when's the right time to leave and when's the right time to start, all this stuff. So first question is just around real quick, number wise, and maybe we'll start with Connie here. How many job searches for each of us? So Connie, you want to start?
I think because I spent a long time as a contractor / freelancer where, you skip from job to job on a fairly regular basis. I think I counted it up one time and it's 18.
18. I just did the math while we were getting ready. I'm at 8. Caroline?
I'm at 2.
Fair enough. Hey, you got to have better than 0, right?
We're starting somewhere.
Erica?
Yeah, I think I'm at 8.
8. And Melissa?
I think I'm about 4 or 5.
Okay.
I've done a lot of different things within the university, so I've kind of hopped around within departments and things of that nature. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so now here's a separate question, and we are trying to. We had a number of questions for folks who are either reserved and said, "Hey, send us a reminder." They could also submit some questions, and one of the questions that was submitted was, if you've been in the business in technical writing for 25 years or so, and you are burned out, what do you recommend? And there was a longer part of that, but I'm boiling it down for time. Thoughts? For somebody who's been doing it for a while, still feel like they got maybe a couple decades left before they're going to be able to kind of finish off the career. Recommendations for this person?
Yeah, I love this question. And I think right now with the COVID situation, burnout is a big issue for a lot of people. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, actually calls burnout not a disease, but a factor in health management. So it's a real thing, and it can be caused by a lot of factors. There's a great article I saw in the Harvard Business Review about burnout, how to deal with it, and none of the things that article suggested had to do with, well, I really hate what I do at my job. It was more about, I really don't like what's going on around me at my work. It wasn't the work itself, it was the situation around me. So things like, I don't have control over what happens to me. That can cause burnout. Or what was another thing? Sorry, I'm going to have to check my notes. Yeah, is my workload too heavy? And I think right now with the COVID situation, a lot of us are working overtime, and that can cause burnout if you're not getting enough rest. So examining things like that, is my burnout because I really hate writing, or is it because I really don't like what's happening in my environment? Am I not getting enough rest, opportunities for rest? Am I doing the same thing too much? So, for example, all day at work, I'm on the computer, I'm writing, I'm doing analytical work, and then on the computer. And then I go home and I get on the computer again. And I write a lot of emails to friends. Am I always doing the same thing? Or am I giving myself some variety, without any electricity? am I unplugging enough?
That makes a lot of sense. I will say with COVID, I've actually switched. I inherited a bunch of cards from my grandmother, and I've just been digging into that set of cards that she had. And when COVID first started, and that was one of the first things I did is send cards to people. I got away from technology because, we weren't as tied to it as we are now, but we would rely heavily on it, especially when we meet with groups from across the state. It was always easier to bring them together without having to find a physical space to do it via computer. But yeah, burnout is hard. And some of the things that I talk about in some of the health-based classes is finding somebody to talk to, a friend that you can share, your frustrations with, or even a journal. Sometimes physically writing it down on pen and paper is extraordinarily helpful for folks. Taking time, sometimes if you're in the middle of something and you find that you're getting yourself super frustrated with whatever, taking some time to do some relaxation, whether that you can look up guided relaxations and such online. There's plenty of stuff out on YouTube. I don't have anything particular recommend, but or if you have a fitness app or watch on your with your phone, there's sometimes those things there as well. But trying to find some way to do that, or even just get out of your environment. Like get up, walk away from the desk. You don't have to go for like a 10-minute walk or anything. You can just get up and move yourself away from the space and then come back and try to refocus in on what's going on. Those are some of the big things and actually I've had folks in one of my workshops come up with some of these ideas, and that's what they do to help manage stress, because burnout comes from feeling stressed too. It's like you said, Erica, it's not necessarily the content of the job, it's how everything else is functioning or not functioning in your perceived world there. And you kind of have to find a way that works for you to mitigate it. At least that's what we talk about in our workshops.
All right. So we are running a little short of time. We got about 12 minutes or so. If we're going to go 60, we can go over. We don't have any issues with that. But I want to let's get ready for our next question, and let's go with this format because we had a number of really good questions. We've had a great conversation. Let's go with one person answering, and then if there's absolutely we have to share this with our audience, let's join. If not, and then we'll have everybody kind of take turns on the answers, and maybe write up some of the additional points, and we can share it on the website or something. So, Connie, what's our next question here?
And the next question is, what have you found to be the best ways to get experience before actually having some? That age-old conundrum of you need to have experience to get a job, and you can't get a job without experience, and all of that sort of stuff.
Okay, 2 words: volunteer and internship.
All right.
Yep. Excellent.
Quick. I like it. Yep. Anybody else?
I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One thing to add on is not just volunteering like with community service organizations, but you can also volunteer with like open source documentation projects. Get that experience within the technical writing field if that's what you're going to go for. You won't necessarily get paid, but you will have actual things that you can put in your portfolio to your next job interview.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, agreed. All right. The different paths for technical writers to take, such as if you're a technical writer through your career, what are some paths that you can take to either start out in being a professional writer or advance, such as working for a manual labor business, universities, working abroad, publishing, volunteering? What paths are there that someone can take as they're trying to get their career going once the volunteering?
I guess I can answer. I think it can take any number of paths, really. And being somebody that's trained to be in nutritional sciences, dietetics, that kind of thing, there's even food writers out there. I mean, one of my professors, her background was in journalism. And here she is teaching us about food service management, right? So it can go any number of directions. You can start out in that, and you can start out maybe in a topic area that's of interest to you. But then things come up sometimes and opportunities make themselves available to you that you could take advantage of and maybe go in a new direction. It doesn't always have to be some sort of prescribed. I've never met anybody that told me there's like a prescribed steps of doing X to get to Y.
Yeah, agreed. Connie, now I assume you're following along on our little question sheet. I made a hot edit on the question order there, just as a heads up.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
So given that you have a ton of different paths that may present themselves during the course of your working career, and different interests depending on your stage of life, how do you develop a job search strategy that that helps identify the right kind of role, no matter what the title may be?
I'll go ahead and answer that one. Even though I'm relatively new once again, I would say that my strategy has always been, first of all, looking through the descriptions. Oftentimes when I've been applying to such writing jobs, Connie, as you mentioned, it doesn't necessarily need to be labeled a writing job. So I think taking the time to look through those duties and even take a look at the applications at times, I've looked through and I've seen that there's a question section below that's included in the application. I think that's a great opportunity to narrow down your search, because when I've filled it out, I've received an email response telling me, okay, this is a little bit more detail about this task, or you discuss it in the interview. And so even though this can be a little bit time intensive, I think it's worth it in order to find a place that you're going to genuinely enjoy working at and the task that you're going to enjoy. So I think it's about taking that extra step. And if it doesn't have a question section within the application, then absolutely asking questions during the interview. As Connie mentioned, not only does it kind of give you brownie points, but it's also a great way to make sure, do I want to be here? Is this a place for me? So that way you're not wasting your own time or the time of the employer.
Right on.
So
okay.
That'd be my advice. Do you have anything else?
Very nice. Okay, so we are coming down. We got a few minutes here, but this question, I want two folks. We'll go Erica first, and then Caroline, I want you to come in second. All right. Is Dr. Conrad, from your knowledge of your program, the MA and the certificate program, as you have these folks who are watching this now and watching the future, will say, hey, I want to find the right professional writing role. What can they expect to have at the end of your program that they may not necessarily have when they start the program?
Yeah, I like that question, Al. And I think that one thing they'll have is some pieces for their portfolio. So pieces for an electronic web-based portfolio that they can share with future employers or with future clients. So they'll have some pieces to put in there. Another thing they'll have is experience with different scenarios, having thought about, okay, you're given this situation. How do I write content around this situation? So that when you're in the job, and somebody gives you a writing task or a content creation task, you don't say, oh, well, we never did this in school. You can say, oh, okay, what's the first thing I need to do? Oh, analyze who's my audience, find some legacy documentation. So those kinds of strategies, rather than, okay, this is how you do this kind of document, but learning some ways to approach any kind of work situation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Caroline, from your experience, like I said, getting involved here, what is it you're seeing that you are helping build your confidence as you get ready to go out into the wider world?
Yeah, so there's several things. First of all, we're developing a community, which I find is really helpful in terms of support. So not only mentors, but also fellow technical writers who do have different specialties from me. And so I continue to learn from them, even if we aren't in class, which has been really helpful. We are learning those basic skills and gaining pieces for our portfolio. But we're also learning this adaptability. We have different professors who have different, not necessarily qualifications, but different preferences. And so it's also teaching us as we learn how to adapt to different clients, because we have these different teachers who are going to grade differently. And the last thing that I think is incredibly important is we have these supports and scaffolding so that not only are we learning these skills, but we know where to go if we are missing a skill or for some reason need to practice it. So for instance, with Dr. Conrad's class, she gave us online exercises that we can do that's linked with New York Times. And so you can work on that if you're feeling like I need to really brush up on my skills. Or we have these textbooks that we can use to make sure, okay, am I creating this proposal correctly? And so even though you're learning them in class, you also still have those resources to continue to learn even after you graduate, which I think is very important.
Nice. Melissa, how about you?
I think it's kind of what's been said, you have all these skills, you get to practice them. I think that's the big thing. Kind of in thinking with my cooperative extension mind is hands-on learning. And that's what they offer, I think, is the hands-on piece. It's like what Erica said, that you have these pieces that can go in a portfolio. And then you have all of these reference materials, like you mentioned, Caroline. All of this is there, and it's not just you had to write some papers for a class or whatever. It's actual content that could be used or is a model for what you can produce for a business or a company or a government or whomever. So I think that that's really kind of the big part, is it's hands-on, in a good way that is productive and produces content that students can use to put out there and say, hire me.
Nice.
Excellent. Okay, with our last 2 minutes, this one is one for everybody. What's one tip that you would give to people to find the right role for them? Erica?
Yeah, be honest with yourself.
Nice. Good.
Melissa?
Ask questions.
Okay,
there's never wrong. I think it's always good to ask and get enough information to make a decision.
Excellent. Great. Caroline?
At the end of the day, technical writing is making information accessible to everyone. And that comes in a lot of different ways, whether you're editing romance novels or writing proposals. And so I think it's really important to be daring, take the time to explore, because at the end of the day, I believe it will truly pay off rather than settling for the first option.
Excellent. Al, how about you?
Understand the skills that are involved in being a great communicator, and the output of that is literally the output of communication is the sum of research, analysis, and organizing the information in some medium. And to understand those skills is to broaden what you could go do, because it is the hardest thing in the world to be able to elaborate and allow folks to understand. So if you understand the ability to ask great questions, to organize those, it puts you into a lot of different categories, as Connie has often said here and earlier, that won't necessarily be labeled comms. It makes you a good analyst that can also communicate. So
I think the one piece of it, one tip that I would have is to always stay curious. Be willing to do research and try out different things. One of my sisters decided she thought curling was the coolest thing she ever saw in the Winter Olympics. She went and joined a curling team. She now crochets stuff for a living. She's a watercolor artist. She remains curious about everything in the world around her, and I think that makes her a more effective communicator. And I think that's a really good approach to take. Be interested in all sorts of things that might not first occur to you, but can lead you down some new paths that can really make you happy and very successful.
Right on. Okay. We are out of time, and we're almost out of questions. So a number of you had submitted some questions. We kind of vaguely got to them. What I'm going to do is share your questions. If you know who you are, I'm going to share the questions and see if we can get a brief write-up, and then I'll send that to the folks who asked them. We hit most of your questions broadly, but maybe not right on the nail on the head. So I will go ahead and do that for anybody who was like, why didn't they ask it? But as we finish up here, Dr. Conrad, Melissa, Caroline, thank you all for your time. Thank you for sharing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Al, Connie, Carolyn, and Melissa.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely.
And best of luck to all of you in your new career moves.
Exactly. Yeah, as you finish up and you move on. Connie, always a pleasure. We always, the hour goes by quick. A lot of prep for 1 hour. All right. So we had so many questions. We're going to share those. If you do have a final question, we didn't promote it too much on this one, but if on Twitter you have the hashtag TWFast and the numeral 5. If you put it out there, we'll check that as the last couple of days move on. We'll pass those questions on to our panel as well. And yeah, just that's the goal. And we're going to do a write-up. So you add it into the comments. You know, we aim to please around here. So anyway, send us those questions. We'll do our best to get those answered. And that is it. For myself, everyone at TechWhirl, thank you so much. And we hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.